very good morning to all the students of class 7. My name is Prerna and I'm your English teacher. And today from your English book Skyline, we are going to be reading chapter number 10. This chapter is actually an extract from very famous detective novel series called as Sherlock Holmes. I hope a few of you might have heard of this series, Sherlock Holmes. It's a very interesting novel series. So we are going to start reading this chapter. Here we go. This is chapter number 10, and the name of this particular part of the novel or this chapter is The Dying Detective. This play is based on Sherlock Holmes' story. Sherlock Holmes is the name of a fictional detective created by Sir Arthur. Sherlock Holmes is known for his skill at logical reasoning and his ability to disguise himself. Most Sherlock Holmes stories are set in London and narrated by Holmes' friend Dr. John Watson. In this story, everything is not quite what it seems. So, what you need to understand is that the main character is a fictional character named Sherlock Holmes, who is a detective by profession, and he has a friend who is a doctor, and the name of his friend is John Watson. So most of the incidents of Sherlock Holmes are narrated by his friend John Watson, and stories are based out in which country, in which part of the world? In London. And who is the author of the series of this novel? Sir Arthur. So let us have a quick look at the characters in this play. So you have Sherlock Holmes, who's of course, I told you, a famous detective. Dr. Watson, who's Sherlock Holmes' friend and colleague. Then you have Mr. Smith, who is a plantation owner. You have Inspector Morton, who is a police officer. And then there is landlady of Sherlock Holmes, right? So here comes scene 1. Landlady. He's dying, Dr. Watson. For 3 days he's been sinking, and I doubt if he will last the day. I told him that I would bring a doctor, but he said he would only see you. You shouldn't waste an hour in coming to him, sir, or you may not see him alive. Watson. I will go home. I will go to him at once. Scene 2. Now, this landlady or this lady, she rushes to Dr. Watson to tell that Sherlock Holmes is very ill, and if Dr. Watson does not reach on time, Sherlock Holmes might be dead. So Dr. Watson, he rushes to Sherlock Holmes' house, and this is scene 2. Holmes refers to Sherlock Holmes. So looking at Dr. Watson, Sherlock Holmes says, "Stand back, stand right back. If you approach me, Watson, I shall order you out of the house." Watson, Dr. Watson says, "But why?" Holmes, "It's for your own sake, Watson. I know what is wrong with me. I have a horribly contagious disease that I picked up from the ship in the docks. Keep your distance and all is well. If you stand over there, I will talk. If you do not, you must leave the room." So Sherlock Holmes, he tells Dr. Watson that I've developed a communicable disease, a contagious disease, and if you come near me, you will also catch hold that disease. So you stand a little far from me, and then I'll tell you what exactly is to be done. So Dr. Watson says, "But if I can't treat you, how can you get better, Holmes?" Then Sherlock Holmes says, "Go and fetch Mr. Smith of 13 Lower Burke Street. It may surprise you to know that this man, Mr. Smith, has better knowledge of this disease than any doctor on earth. He's a planter and a well-known resident of Sumatra and is now visiting London." So Dr. Watson says, he is a plantation owner. Then Sherlock says, yes, and an outbreak of the disease upon his plantation, which was far from any hospital, made him study it himself, with some rather far reaching consequences. Watson says, so he will know how to cure you. Holmes says, if you could persuade him, persuade means to convince someone. If you could persuade him to come here and share with us his experience of this disease, I have no doubt that I will be cured. Plead with him. Watson, there's been an argument between us. So Sherlock Holmes is telling Dr. Watson that you go and get this man, Mr. Smith, because he's the one who knows how to cure the disease. He's because this disease developed from his plantation farms, from his plantation area, and just request him, plead him that he should come and cure me. So Dr. Watson is a little confused. He says, why should I plead him? So Sherlock Holmes says that it's because there was an argument between Mr. Smith and me. Dr. Watson wants to know what was the argument about. Sherlock Holmes says, his nephew Watson, I believed that his death was no accident. The boy died horribly. I suspected Mr. Smith. He had a grudge against me. You will soften him, Watson. Beg him, plead with him, get him here by any means. He can save me, only he. So Sherlock Holmes is telling Dr. Watson that because Mr. Smith has a grudge against me. Grudge is, when you don't like someone, probably because the other person has hurt you really bad. Mentally or emotionally the person has hurt you. So Sherlock Holmes is telling Dr. Watson that you will really have to beg Mr. Smith to come and cure me. So Watson says, I will bring him in a taxi. Sherlock Holmes says, you will do nothing of that sort. You will persuade him to come and then you will return before him. Make any excuses so as not to come with him. Don't forget, Watson, you won't fail me. You never did fail me. To not fail someone is to never let them down, to help them achieve something. Then we are at scene 3, wherein Dr. Watson has gone to Mr. Smith's house. Watson says, I have come home from Mr. Sherlock Holmes. He's dying. He believes that you are the only man in London who can save him. Mr. Smith, why should Mr. Holmes think that I could help him in this trouble? Watson, because of your knowledge of the tropical disease. So Mr. Smith says, is he pale? Is his speech rambling? Rambling means, when person is speaking in a way that you really can't understand what the other person is talking about. Watson says, occasionally. Mr. Smith replies, this sounds serious. Even though he's no friend of mine, I will come at once. You can rely upon my being there within half an hour at most. Now, Dr. Watson is rest assured that Mr. Smith is going to come over and cure Sherlock Holmes. So, we are now at scene 4. Holmes. Well, did you see him, Watson? Watson says, yes, he is coming. Holmes says, admirable, Watson, admirable. You are the best of messengers. You can now disappear from the scene. Watson says, I must wait and hear his opinion, Holmes. Sherlock Holmes. Of course you must, but I have reasons to support that this opinion would be much more frank and valuable if he imagines that we are alone. There is a room for you behind the head of my bed, Watson, and don't budge whatever happens. Whatever happens to you here, don't speak, don't move, just listen with all your ears budges, to just enter without being called. Watson hides in the rooms behind the head of the bed. Smith knocks at the door, gets no reply, and enters. Holmes, Holmes, can't you hear me, Holmes? Sherlock says, is that you, Mr. Smith? I hardly dared hope that you would come. Mr. Smith, do you know what is wrong with you? Sherlock Holmes says, the same disease that Victor had. Who is Victor? Victor is Mr. Smith's nephew, and Sherlock Holmes at one point of time suspected that it is Mr. Smith who had killed his nephew Victor. So Mr. Smith says Victor was a dead man on the fourth day, a strong, hearty young fellow. It was certainly, as you said, very surprising that he should have caught a tropical disease in the heart of London, a disease too of which I had made such a very special study. Quite a coincidence, home. So Mr. Smith is saying that Victor was a very healthy young man. And it is very, I know you suspected me because it is very strange that in London, Victor caught a tropical disease. So when in London the climate is not tropical, then how is that Victor could have caught tropical disease? So because Mr. Smith had knowledge about tropical disease, that is the reason Sherlock Holmes suspected Mr. Smith as the murderer of Victor. Holmes says, I know how you killed Victor. Mr. Smith says, oh, you do? Do you? Well, you can't prove it anyhow. But what do you think of yourself spreading reports about me like that and then crawling to me for help the moment you are in trouble? What sort of a game is that, huh? Sherlock says, give me water. Mr. Smith, you are very near to your end, my friend, but I don't want you to go till I have had a word with you. That's why I give you water. And Mr. Smith, he pours some water in Sherlock's mouth. There, don't slop it about. That's right. Can you understand what I say? Sherlock says, yes. Do what you can for me. Cure me and I will forget what I know. Smith says, you can forget it or remember it just as you like it. You won't live to stand in the witness box. You will soon be in quite another shaped box, my good Holmes, I assure you. What is the other box Smith is referring to? He's referring to a coffin. It matters nothing to me that you know how my nephew died. It's not him we are talking about. It's you. Holmes says, yes, but please give me water. Please help me. Give me something to kill the pain. Smith, painful is it? Yes. Victor did some squealing towards the end too. Your legs feel cramped, I suppose. Squealing is a high-pitched voice. And cramp is, when you feel that your muscles are being stretched and and the pain that you feel, that is called as cramping of the muscles. Holmes, yes, such painful cramps. Smith, can you remember any unusual incident in your life just about the time your symptoms began? Did anything come by post? A box by chance? And Holmes says, I'm fainting, I'm gone. Smith, you shall hear me. Do you remember a box? An ivory box. It came on Wednesday. You opened it. Do you remember? So now Mr. Smith is telling Sherlock that how you have how you've caught this tropical disease. So Mr. Smith is talking about an ivory box that was posted to Sherlock Holmes on Wednesday. Holmes says, yes, I opened it. There was a sharp spring inside it. Some joke? Smith says, it was no joke, as you will find to your cost. You fool, who asked you to cross my path? If you had left me alone, I would have never hurt you. So the ivory box that was delivered to Sherlock Holmes, the moment he opened that box, there was a spring that just came up, and in that spring, the moment that spring pinched Sherlock Holmes, he caught hold that disease. Mr. Smith, now Sherlock Holmes says, I remember the spring, it drew blood. This box, the one on the table? Mr. Smith says, the very one, by George. And it may as well as leave the room in my pocket. Puts it in his pocket. So Mr. Smith, he picks up that ivory box and puts it in his pocket. There goes your last shred of evidence. Now, Mr. Smith is very happy because he has destroyed the evidence and he knows that Sherlock is also going to die. So, all the evidence or the witness against him, there's going to be no evidence against him, no witness against him, and he's going to easily move away. But you have the truth now, Holmes. You can die with that knowledge that I killed you. You knew too much of the fate of Victor Savage, so you had to share it. You are very near to your end, Holmes. I will sit here and I will watch you die. So look how cruel Mr. Smith is. Holmes, he sits up in his bed and calls in a confident voice. All is in order and this is your man. Suddenly, Sherlock Holmes, his tone, his voice, everything changes, and he says, all is in order, and this is your man. Inspector Morton appears from behind the curtain. So there was a policeman hiding in that room. Morton, Mr. Smith, I arrest you on the charge of the murder of one Victor Savage. Watson. So remember, Watson was also inside the room. He appears from behind the bed head. And the attempted murder of Sherlock Holmes. By the way, the prisoner has a small box in the right hand pocket of his coat, which would be sensible to remove. So Dr. Watson now tells Inspector Morton that there is also an evidence, that box, which is an evidence which will prove that how Mr. Smith tried to kill Sherlock Holmes. I would have handled it carefully if I were you. Put it down here. It may play an important part in the trial. Inspector Morton leads Mr. Smith away. So Mr. Smith is now taken to the prison. Sherlock Holmes. My dear Watson, I owe you 1,000 apologies. To think that I had to fool you into believing I was sick. Watson. But your appearance, Holmes, your ghastly face. What is the meaning of the ghastly? Means horrible face. Holmes says, 3 days of not eating anything at all does not improve one's beauty, Watson. For the rest, there's nothing which a sponge may not cure. With Vaseline upon my forehead, upon one's forehead, belladonna in one's eyes, rouge over the cheekbones, and crust of beeswax around one's lips, a very satisfying effect can be produced. Malingering is a subject upon which I have sometimes thought of writing an essay. Malingering is when you are pretending to be sick. So in this particular paragraph, Sherlock Holmes is telling Dr. Watson that how I made this look wherein one could believe that yes, I am terribly sick. So he did not eat anything for 3 days. Then he applied a bit of rouge, he applied some belladonna and a lot many things over his face. Watson, but what about the box, the one that hurt you? So Dr. Watson was like, oh my God, but that box has hurt you. That box has put that disease inside your body. Holmes says, no, Watson, I did not touch that box. You can see if you look at it sideways, where the sharp spring like a viper's tooth emerges as you open it. I dare say it was by some such device that poor Savage was murdered. Poor Savage is Victor we are talking about. It was clear to me, however, that by pretending that he had really succeeded in his plan to kill me, I might get him to confess. So how Sherlock Holmes very in using his witty sense, how he planned to confess to get Mr. Smith confess that yes, he was the one who had murdered his nephew Victor. That pretense I have carried out with the thoroughness of a true artist. Elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary means logic. All right. So enjoyed reading the story about Sherlock Holmes, and just like this, there are a lot more incidents about Sherlock Holmes which you'll find really interesting, and you must read this novel. It's truly a treat to read these series. Thank you so much.